As Israel resumes its heavy bombardment of Gaza, Arab nations put forward a reconstruction plan. But is it too little, too late?
Everybody is using their own leverage over Washington in order to convince Washington of stopping the war. First, we have to stop the war, and then we can think of what to do, how to handle the post-war era.
With the Trump administration ramping up military aid to Israel and launching airstrikes on Yemen, is Washington's policy destabilizing the region?
We've been trying to generally provide stability, security, and to oppose those who inflict pain and damage.
Hello, I'm Rida Fakhri. Welcome to the program. We begin with a look at recent events in Gaza following Israel's resumption of large-scale attacks on the Strip, killing hundreds of civilians and violating the ceasefire agreement reached just weeks ago. Millions of Palestinians are on the verge of starvation following Israel's halting of humanitarian aid, including food and medicine. The United Nations has called the humanitarian situation beyond catastrophic. So today we ask, what will it take to stop the bloodshed? Can Arab states exert any influence on Israel to end its war on Gaza? Following President Trump's threat to take over and own the Gaza Strip, expelling its entire population, the Arab League agreed to an Egyptian plan for Gaza's reconstruction and governance. But the $53 billion proposal was rejected by the United States and Israel. The plan proposes a committee of independent Palestinian experts to oversee Gaza for a temporary period while, quote, working towards empowering the Palestinian Authority to return. In the first phase, 1.5 million displaced Palestinians would be moved into housing units in Gaza, while rubble and any unexploded ordnance is cleared. The second phase would include rebuilding permanent housing. An airport and 2 seaports would be built during the third phase. Joining me now to discuss this plan is Hossam Zaki, Assistant Secretary General of the Arab League. Ambassador Hossam Zaki, the Arab League has put forward a reconstruction plan for Gaza, but it has been rejected, it has been dismissed outright by the United States and Israel. Just how viable is it without their support?
I don't think it has been dismissed by the US. I think it has, as expected, been dismissed by Israel. But with the American administration, I think there have been some good talks. I think it was well received in a spirit of cooperation. I think the American administration are not challenging the plan, but they have issues or questions they want to clarify from those who narrated the plan and prepared it. And it's a valid start.
You do admit that it has been rejected by the Israelis. As you know, Gaza is still occupied by Israel. Without them, nothing can happen in Gaza. How do you get around that problem?
We count on international, American, European support, not on Israeli support. The Israeli support is not going to be forthcoming at all. Israel does not want to see an Egyptian plan, an Arab plan, an Islamic plan, any kind of plan to let the Palestinians remain on their land.
So what's the point of putting forward a plan? Is it just a face-saving mechanism for the Arab League, which, frankly, has done very little, if anything, since Israel's assault on Gaza?
We have done a lot. We have done a lot in terms of political support, and that counts for a lot. It is true that we have not been able to stop the war, but neither has been anybody encountered any success in putting pressure on the Israelis to stop the war.
Well, no, hold on. Now, there are countries that are doing far more than Arab nations. South Africa has taken a case of genocide to the International Court of Justice. What has the Arab League done?
And we have joined in. And we have joined in not only the South African case, but other cases as well.
What do you mean you have joined in? If I look at a list of 14 nations that have either joined the ICJ case against Israel formally or intend to, there's only one Arab country, Libya. Where are all the others?
We tried to join in, we applied, but they have their own rules of procedure. But that is not the only issue here. We are looking for ways to stop the war. Our countries, especially Egypt and Qatar, are looking for ways to stop the war. And there is an Islamic Arab Committee with a wide membership that has traveled the world in order to stop the war.
But Israel just attacked Gaza yet again in violation of the ceasefire. What are the 22 Arab nations doing?
It's not about the 22 Arab nations. It's about the group of nations that have similar thinking, a similar approach, or an approach that is very close to one another, trying to work on that issue in order to put an end to the war. You have a Palestinian side called Hamas that has its own internal dynamics, its own decision-making process. And then you have the Israelis, the occupying power, with their own decision-making process and dynamics, and they do not want to stop the war. They do not want to stop.
But again, with respect, you are shifting the blame.
Why do you want to put it squarely on the Arab leadership? Why
Because
not
you would
on the
expect
Americans?
Arab governments to use some of their leverage.
Why not on the Islamic states? I think we need to be fair. The Israelis are not listening to anyone. They're not respecting international law. They're not respecting anything.
Are Arabs doing enough, though? Look at African nations, Latin American nations, Asian nations like Malaysia. They've joined a group called the Hague Group to exert pressure on Israel, to impose sanctions if needed, to get them.
And where did that go?
Well,
and where did that go?
Well, at least they're doing something about it. What are the Arabs doing to bring about any accountability?
You have to. We just held an extraordinary summit at the beginning of this month in order to adopt a plan that was put together by Egyptian experts in order to reconstruct the Gaza Strip with the Palestinian population living in it.
But let me ask you, first, where is the money coming from? Second, why should Arab nations pay for the damage that was inflicted by Israel?
The Arab role is in formulating a political position, and that is very important for the current situation. The Arab role is in putting pressure on everybody to put pressure on Israel. The Arab role is going to be very instrumental in putting an international effort together in order to rebuild Gaza.
Why are Arab nations wanting to rebuild Gaza but not putting forward any constructive plan to actually protect Palestinians and end this war?
No, take a good look at the Arab Summit last resolution that was adopted on March 4th. This is a resolution that has included, inter alia, a reference to the call for an international protection force in the Palestinian territories. This is a clear call for international protection of the Palestinian people.
You know that Palestinians feel completely betrayed by Arabs. They've done absolutely nothing to stop the slaughter in Gaza, which continues.
Well,
and the starvation.
If you're suggesting, because this is serious. If you're suggesting that absolutely nothing is by not declaring war on Israel, it is true that nobody has declared war on Israel.
No one is asking any Arab or Muslim nation to resort to the use of force against Israel, but at the very minimum, shouldn't there be an economic boycott? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not the one who will tell Arab countries what to do, but again,
what is the purpose of the Arab League if it cannot? What is the purpose if in an extreme situation like this, Ambassador Zaki, let me just finish my question. If in an extreme situation like this, it isn't able to put up a united common front, if it isn't able to pressure its own member states to cut economic ties with Israel, to stop its military cooperation with Israel?
Is that going to compel the Israelis to stop the war? I'm not sure.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying all 22 Arab League nations, including the wealthy Gulf nations, which you might argue have considerable influence, potentially in Washington, can do absolutely nothing and just sit back and issue statements.
I'm not saying that at all. You're saying this maybe, but I don't know why, but I'm not saying this. What I'm saying is, yes, everybody is using their own leverage over Washington in order to convince Washington of stopping the war. First, we have to stop the war, and then we can think of what to do, how to handle the post-war era. And there's been a lot of thinking about this, and ideas are there on the table, debated.
How long will you keep debating these issues when the situation is so grave and dire?
It doesn't really matter because
well, it does matter because the League has reportedly called on member states, Ambassador. The League has reportedly called on member states to gradually end military cooperation with Israel. What's the point of gradually ending military cooperation with Israel when the killing is happening right now?
Well, it is not about only gradually ending the military cooperation. It's about whether the big powers, those that Israel is probably going to listen to, we're not sure, probably going to listen to, whether they provide it with the needed weaponry, with the needed armaments, with the needed ammunition in order to conduct its war. The answer, unfortunately, is yes, everybody, all those parties are guilty as charged. The Arabs are not doing that.
Including
the
Arabs
are watching.
Let me ask you then,
No, not
does
the Arabs.
military
Those
cooperation...
are the Americans and the Europeans.
Well, does military cooperation with Israel make Arab states complicit in the plausible genocide of Palestinians?
I don't see. Where did you see that? Where did you see the Arab?
Well, I'll give you a few examples.
Cooperation, military
I'll give you a few
cooperation
examples. Just in January, an Israeli military supplier called Third Eye Systems said it had sold a 30% stake to an Emirati state-owned defense conglomerate for $10 million. Morocco has also signed trade and arms deals with Israel. The Bahraini government has held joint military drills with Israel, and the list goes on.
If this interview is about sovereign decisions made by Arab member states, that's out of my field, out of my domain. I cannot discuss that. That's beyond my domain. I cannot discuss that. What I can discuss with you is Gaza and the plan for Gaza and what we can achieve in order to get the Gazans to feel normal again, to stop the war, and to rebuild their lives on their territory.
What is the Arab League doing currently to prevent the forced displacement of Palestinians?
We are lobbying the whole world. And frankly, we have been very pleasantly surprised by that because we think that most of the world does not even need lobbying from our side. Everybody agrees that the forced migration or any type of forcing the Palestinians, call it what you want, out of their homeland is just unacceptable, unlawful, immoral, and cannot be tolerated. So we need to make sure that everybody reads from the same note, and that would leave the Israelis isolated in their own ideas.
Can you tell us whether or not there is disunity among member states in the Arab League when it comes to Hamas and the role Hamas can play? Because the League's plan calls for a return of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza.
Yes.
As you know, well, the PA has lost a lot of its legitimacy.
We have member states who happen to have visions and points of view that may be different from one another. And that is absolutely legitimate. It happens in the European Union, the African Union, all sorts of international organizations. And yes, this is a very, very touchy issue. This is a very thorny issue. What to do in Gaza after the war, the presence of Hamas, the weapons of Hamas. And we said from the very outset, Palestinians should govern Palestinians. So the Palestinian Authority, is it the best suited? Yes, for the time being it is.
Are you saying that you will guarantee that there will be no role for Hamas in the governance of Gaza?
We said that, and they have accepted that. And it is not something groundbreaking. Now, the issues that are plaguing a full agreement on this are not about the governance, but about other issues related to security, about the militants, about the arms, about so many other issues. So that is still an unresolved discussion. We made this plan in order to put forward reliable, tangible, workable, practical ideas in order to work around the issues in Gaza. And the same can be done for the West Bank as well. We do not want to see Palestinians pushed out of their territory. This is crucial.
You mentioned the West Bank, and we know that Netanyahu has vowed to annex the West Bank as well. Is there a red line for you?
This is a hypothetical question. I'm not ready to answer it now. It's going to be a very challenging thing to deal with. But let's not debate it right now. We have enough on our plate.
Ambassador Hossam Zaki, Assistant Secretary General of the Arab League, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, while Arab states reiterate their calls for a peaceful solution, the US has doubled down on military action. Earlier this month, American forces carried out airstrikes on Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen, killing dozens of civilians, including children. The Trump administration insists that the US is targeting the Houthis to protect international security, but critics argue it is only pushing the region closer to a wider war with Iran. Washington has approved nearly $12 billion in new weapons sales to Israel since January. Joining me now to discuss America's role in the region is Admiral William Fallon, a former commander of the US Central Command, CENTCOM. Admiral Fallon, in February 2025, the Trump administration approved arms sales to Israel worth $3 billion, bypassing Congress. The explanation from the Secretary of State was, quote, that an emergency exists that requires the immediate sale of arms to the government of Israel. He went on to say that it is in the national security interest of the United States. Is it?
Well, this decision's been made many years ago and frankly hasn't changed over time. And given what transpired with this unbelievable attack into Israel from the Gaza and Hamas leadership, I think it's the right thing to do.
But hold on, is it the right thing to do to keep pouring weapons into this conflict and arming Israel, given the devastation that has been inflicted on Gaza and its civilian population?
Well, it's very unfortunate, but the leadership of Hamas could care less about the population of Gaza. It's pretty obvious by the way they conduct themselves. They're using the population as basically as a tethered goat to keep the Israelis engaged.
By the same token, could Netanyahu care less about the Israeli hostages?
No, I think because Israel is actually a democratic society, a political society, he has to care about them. Regrettably, though, I suspect that most, if not all, have already been killed, and this is the tragedy of it. They're being used by Hamas to try to get the Israelis to do what they want.
What kind of democratic society, quote unquote, would kill thousands upon thousands of civilians and starve them to death?
Well, Ida, there's a war going on and has been for some time. This conflict was started by the Hamas leadership with this raid into Israel. And the Israelis, in my opinion, had to respond to it.
Does anything justify Israel's continued offensive on Gaza?
The reality is that the immediate challenge for the Israeli government is to try to retrieve their hostages. And from a military perspective, extremely difficult to do, given the way the Hamas leadership has buried themselves in there. So Israel has stated it wants the hostages back. They negotiated a deal that fell apart.
It didn't fall apart. Israel refused to move on to phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement, therefore violating this agreement. There is long-term damage that is being done to the United States' standing and credibility in the region, not to mention the long-term instability that is being created. Would you consider Israel today a strong asset or a strategic liability?
I would go with the asset without a doubt. And this is not something new. And by the way, stability in this region, come on, I've been over there for 50 years personally, and it hasn't been stable for a day that I've been there.
How much is
So
the United States responsible for that, Admiral?
well, everybody bears some responsibility, but the reality is that we've been trying to generally provide stability, security, and to oppose those who inflict pain and damage on others.
Should the US be reassessing its unconditional military support to Israel?
Well, first of all, I don't know who said it's unconditional. I certainly didn't use that. I don't think it is.
Well, it
based on
certainly
what I've
looks
seen.
like that, doesn't it?
No, it's been up and down over the years, and particularly over the past year. But it's a very difficult situation. This part of the world's been in turmoil for many, many centuries. Didn't start with ours. I doubt it's going to end anytime soon. It's very unfortunate, but it's symptomatic of conflicts that just don't seem to end.
If this situation does escalate into a regional war and a confrontation with Iran, is the United States ready for what comes next?
Well, I'm not sure it's going to escalate into a war. And based on my view of where Iran sits right now, if I were in Tehran, I'd be thinking pretty seriously before I lifted a finger to escalate anything. They're not in a strong position right now, and so I'm not particularly worried about that. But the reality remains that Iran is the principal instigator of trouble throughout the region. And you pick the country, whether it's Yemen or Syria or Lebanon or Gaza. It's an Iranian instigation that's been the cause for trouble. So,
well, some would say that the United States has actually fueled quite a bit of crises in the region. You take Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. Does the US risk making the same mistakes again if it went to war with Iran at the behest of Israel?
I've been in the region since the U.S. went in, and we had never really been there very much before 1979, 1980, the early 80s, and it's been very, very difficult to get extricated from the challenges. But once in, we seem to be caught up in a swirling, continual series of events. But that's the reality of this region. It's very volatile, and there are long-time enmities that predate the existence of the U.S. that are just the reality on the ground. So I think we try to make the best decisions we can, and we try to work with those who are willing to work with us.
Is the US making the best decisions it can by launching airstrikes against Yemen, against the Houthis?
Well, as the former commander over there, I probably would look for some other things, but because I'm not sure that's going to be very effective. It certainly hasn't been to date. But the challenge is going to the source of the problem, and that source is Iran.
But is it sound assessment, though, to see the Houthis as merely an extension of Iran, because they have very divergent positions? The Houthis have made their attacks in the Red Sea contingent on Israel stopping its blockade of Gaza. They've been much more willing to take risks than the Iranians have. How do you assess their strength today? And can Washington really completely annihilate the Houthis as Trump has said he would?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the Houthis really care much about Israel in truth, but they've been armed. They want to make sure that they stick around to rule that country. And right now, the only solid supporter they have is Iran. So they're probably going to continue to do the bidding that Iran asks.
What is Washington's aim, though? Can it afford to open another front, this time with Iran?
Well, I think the reality is Washington's got much bigger fish to fry than Iran. And so that's probably what it ought to be focused on. And I would hope that Trump administration actually has that priority list in order.
Admiral William Fallon, a former commander of US Central Command, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
The US continues to insist that Iran, not Israel, is the key disrupting force in the Middle East. But as Israel resumes its assault on Gaza, it is also ramping up efforts to drag the United States into a broader regional war, one that would target Iran and redraw the map of the Middle East. It is doing so at the expense of international law, humanitarian norms, and US strategic interests. As for the Arab states, especially the Gulf powers, their silence has been deafening. Some have been complicit, others quietly supportive. Few have done anything meaningful to stop the bloodshed. The Gaza plan from the Arab League, many see it as a face-saving gesture. Too little, too late, they say, and quite possibly dead on arrival. That's all from Yerida Fakhri and the team. Thanks for watching.